For marketers, Seth Godin has a way of just saying things in just the right way. He says that too often we think about what something does before we decide what's it for and whether or not it worked. But something's actually worth doing. It is worth us knowing right from the outset what's it for and how will we know that we've been successful. Hey, Rogue Nation, it's Chip Rosales here, and I'm so glad that you've joined us for another episode of While You Were Working. We're going to talk a lot about that today. What is this marketing thing for? What are we doing all this for? And so to help us cut through some of that insanity, we've invited Jason Falls with us. You know Jason, Jason, actually, you probably don't know that Jason is the lead strategist. He's leading strategy over at Cornett Agency in Kentucky. But he does that by day, but by night and during the week, you may have seen him at conferences. You might catch him on his social profiles. You've probably been following Jason because he's an outspoken voice in the marketing space, and we are so glad to have you with us today, Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Chip. It's good to be here, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion today.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Well, one of the things that you've got a reputation for being renegade. We love that. We love that over here at Rogue. We think that's an incredible thing. We've had an opportunity to catch up with you and via email and some pre-show calls and some things like that. And we know one thing that you love, and you love bourbon. We know that. It doesn't take long for us to find that out. But one of the things that we were in our conversations, you actually kind of teased us with a little bit of a story. You teased us about 10-year-old Jason, Ted Kennedy, and moonshine. So with that setup, go.
Yeah. So Ted Kennedy makes this visit to Eastern Kentucky. It was kind of, I think, an anniversary of Robert Kennedy's visit to Eastern Kentucky to kind of look through, the coal mines. And normally when politicians outside of Eastern Kentucky do a tour, it's typically to look at the lack of education and poverty and things of that nature, which is a mischaracterization of Eastern Kentucky, because I like to tell people that the mountains of Eastern Kentucky have rich people, poor people, black people, white people, educated people, undereducated people, just like anywhere else. We just have an accent in mountains. But nonetheless, he came on a tour when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and my mother decided, I was a big John F. Kennedy fan. I was a history buff, and that was one of the things that I like to study. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get to meet Ted Kennedy somehow. So we decided to go and sort of camp out and sort of stalk one of his stops. And my mother decided, well, we're going to put together a gift package, a box of things to give him. So we had these red, white, and blue pillows that were handcrafted by a mountain craftswoman. We had several other little Appalachian arts and crafts gifts and artifacts. And then tucked in the box, we had a pint of moonshine because we knew Kennedy would enjoy that. And I didn't really have anything to do with the moonshine. Obviously, I was too young, but I knew it was there. And so he was answering questions from reporters in front of this health department in Floyd County, Kentucky. And here I am, little 9-year-old, 10-year-old Jason Falls. I get this box, and I'm muscling my way up through the reporters, and I knock them out of the way. And I kind of get right up in front of the press conference and say, Mr. Kennedy, we'd like to give you some presents. And I kind of held it out there. And he said, well, that's nice. And he grabs the box and shows off. He didn't pull the moonshine out, but he was like, oh, look, these are great pillows and arts and crafts. And there's a big chunk of Eastern Kentucky coal on a plaque of some sort with a thing on it. And so we gave him a bunch of gifts. And of course, his security team takes it and puts it in the car or whatever. So I have no earthly idea if he even got the moonshine, but we made sure we gave it to him.
But you did find your way to the front of the stage. So
absolutely. I got up there.
That sounds like a little foreshadowing for sure. Well,
I get attention, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we love it. And we're all about finding that attention and holding it over here too. So a lot of us, I think in this realm, we know that the digital platforms are changing. We know that they're always changing. And for too many of us, it just seems a little too easy to just keep doing things the way that we've always done them. We're kind of hoping that something's going to change, that it's going to suddenly catch on, that, we're just hoping, and hoping is not a strategy. And we know that. And so, we started the show with this question: what's it for? What are we doing all of this stuff for? And I know you have a very specific perspective, if you will, on social media and what social media is for. How would you answer that? What's social media for?
I mean, I think social media, if you go back to the first book that Eric Deckers and I, co-authored together, No Bullshit Social Media, which we published, 2011. So it was a while back now, but it's still relevant because it's very much a social media strategy book. It's not necessarily a book about how to use social media tools. It's about how to think of it from a business perspective. And so in that book, we carved out 7 things, which I've kind of consolidated 2 of them down. And when I talk to crowds now, I say, look, social media can basically do 6 things for your business. It has 6 strategic purposes. One is it's really good for creating branding and awareness opportunities to get more people to know about you and your product. It can help you build community. It can help protect your reputation, whether that be involving yourself in conversations where people are saying bad things about you, or helping you rank well in search, because social signals help you rank well in search to kind of mitigate the bad that might be out there. It can help you facilitate customer service, research and development, or drive sales and leads. So those are the 6 broad categories of what social media can do for your business. What your job as a marketer is to decide what you want it to do, and then ladder that up to your overall marketing and business goals, and then develop strategies from there, and then plan to measure that out. So in the early days of social media marketing, probably in 2007, 2008, you had a lot of people complaining that we're not getting anything out of social media. There's no ROI here. We don't understand what you get out of it. And they were saying that because they would think, well, social media is about playing on Twitter or Facebook, and there's nothing strategic that can happen out of it. But it was because they weren't intentionally using it for a strategic purpose, and therefore they weren't planning to use it for a strategic purpose, and therefore they weren't putting in the measurement mechanisms to see what they were getting out of that strategic purpose. So they weren't using it right, and therefore they weren't getting out of it what they thought they could. And so if you actually say, we're going to use it for sales, here's what we're going to sell, here's how we're going to sell it. We understand that it's social, so it's not a sales first channel. So we're also going to do all these other things to create trust and a relationship and an environment where sales can happen. And then we're going to pick our spots where we can push promotions and whatnot. And then we're going to set measurement systems with our website or our e-commerce platform so that we can know where we are getting sales from. Then at the end of the day, you can say, hey, we use social media for sales. We drove this many conversions and we generated this much revenue. And now at the end of the day, you're looking at the bottom line going, damn, we use social media for a strategic purpose and it worked. And so having that intention and planning helps you be more strategic with it and get more out of it.
I noticed you're not just preaching to the choir. You're actually doing these things yourself in your different channels for yourself personally. You've chosen to use different channels for different means. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about that and why you've done that and how you've seen some success in the different channels that you've done, even for yourself personally?
Well, sure. I use, personally, I use different channels for different things. The number one channel I think that most people know me for is Twitter. And I've used Twitter over the years to just build kind of a thought leadership reputation for myself. And my only strategy ever on Twitter has always been to share good content, find really good content, build up a reputation as a reliable resource for links to smart articles. Now, they can be articles that I wrote. They can be my own content. But they can also be articles from other places where I say, hey, I read this today and it made me smarter about something. So maybe it can make you smarter too. And so Twitter is kind of a primary place where from 2006 or whenever I joined Twitter, 2007, until even now, I just share good content there and have built a nice audience. Facebook is I've used for that, but I've also used it as more of a personal interaction place. And I've had a brand page for my speaking life, but I've also just used it more as a personal platform to build relationships with individuals. LinkedIn, though, I use primarily in a way that most people don't see, because for LinkedIn, I use the Sales Navigator paid service on LinkedIn, kind of the premium account. And I use that for prospecting and being able to do the private in-mails, to have more of those, to reach out to people and network privately and say, hey, I work at Cornet. We've got, a certain amount of skills in this area. We understand you might be looking for an agency or whatever. There's several ways to do it, but I use that for new business prospecting, sometimes for Cornet and the agency that I'm working for, sometimes for, conferences and events that might need a speaker. So I use it to really kind of get intel on who's out there that I might want to reach out to in hopes of meeting, building a relationship with, and potentially doing business with. And then, Instagram is one of those platforms where I just like to kind of have fun. And, I've kind of carved out my own little content platform there of sharing my thoughts, ideas, tasting notes, and whatnot around bourbon. So it's really focused on bourbon. But that's just me. I mean, for each platform and then the other platforms beyond that, I've advised clients to use, each of those platforms for lots of different reasons. And both from a brand perspective and then from a thought leadership perspective with individuals as well. So there's a gamut of reasons that you would use.
I wanted to kind of jump in right there because I know that you have, we've had some conversations along these lines, and you've talked about some of the ways that you've consulted people to think about their social media channels and what they should be doing with it. You've talked about that, social media is not necessarily a sales first platform. We got it. So you've talked about the conversation and the social listening and some of those kind of components. And you've talked about actually understanding what your target and your ideal audience is looking for, and then how that is actually leading itself towards content that they can't put down. I'd love for you to expand a little bit on that. I know we called this whole episode Insatiable Content. Those were actually your words. So we stole them from you blatantly. But that is what you were talking about. This is what we need to do social media for, is to figure out how to create that insatiable content.
Yeah, I mean, social listening is one of those things that that's a technique and a technology platform approach that I fell in love with a long time ago. And it really gives you, that kind of fly on the wall perspective on your customers in the social space when you can eavesdrop into their conversations, and they're public conversations. So there's nothing like weird about it. If you're watching people have conversations on Twitter about going out and having cocktails, and you as a bourbon brand can, sort of ascertain their attitudes, opinions about brands, about bars, about, the types of cocktails they like to drink, and that gives you intel to be able to approach them from a conversation standpoint, which allows you to insert yourself into that conversation in a relevant way, much easier than just walking in and saying, "Hi, I'm a brand," right? Then you should capitalize on that. And being able to use social listening to feed yourself with some really good smarts about your customers, where they are, who they're talking to, what they're talking about. Even if they're not talking about you, your product, your category, your industry, even if you just know what topics they are talking about, so that when you enter the conversation, you make sense to them, right? So not everybody is going to go out for drinks on a Friday night or a Saturday night and talk about what they're drinking. They're not going to necessarily talk about bourbon. They might be talking about sports. They might be talking about TV, music, lots of different things. So a bourbon brand doesn't want to jump into a conversation on Instagram or Twitter and talk about themselves or talk about bourbon specifically. But if they know, hey, everybody this Friday is talking about the Oscar awards coming up, or they're talking about Bonnaroo, or they're talking about some sporting event, or the end of Major League Baseball season. Now all of a sudden, the bourbon brand, if it aligns with what the brand is known for, has the opportunity, the permission to walk into that conversation and be a part of it, rather than feel like it's interrupting that conversation. And so having that intel and having your finger on the pulse of what your consumers are saying, when and where, gives you a lot more understanding of how you can be a part of their experience and not adjacent to it, which gives you a lot higher degree of relevance.
And we're seeing a whole lot of that just with the political realm, what's going on there. I know Wendy's does a great job of that socially. They're one of the absolute best. It makes me think, as you were talking about that, you said how important it was that it actually align with your brand and what your brand is trying to achieve, and that makes so much sense. We do a lot of talking about measurement and how these digital channels and these social realms are so measurable. And I think that's true. There's never been more data for people to look at and to measure. But lots of times when I've heard you talk, you say we're actually thinking about the measurement of social media all wrong, and the ROI of social media. We're not thinking about it as we should. How would you advise those people listening and watching to be thinking about the return on investment that comes with social media?
Well, return on investment, it's an important metric. It's an important phrase to understand, but it's an accounting measure, right? It's a mathematical formula, and it is the number, the total number of dollars that you made minus the total number of dollars you spent divided by the total number of dollars you spent. It's an equation, and it's a percentage. And if you're over 100%, then you have positive ROI. If you're under 100%, then you lost money. Basically, you have negative ROI. But it's important. And as a business, you have to measure ROI. But if you think only in terms of return on investments, if you think only in terms of dollars, then you're missing 90% of what social media can do for you. Because when you think about it, most companies, when they come to the table and use social media, think about the original companies coming to like the Dells of the world and the Southwest Airlines of the world and the Comcasts of the world coming to social media. Why did they come there? They came there because they had a customer service problem. It wasn't that they had a sales problem. It wasn't that they were trying to drive revenue. It wasn't that they were trying to make money. It was because they had people who were bitching about them on the internet, right? That has an impact on the bottom line down the road, but the issue was not about money. The issue was about reputation. It was about service. And so that is a benefit. If you can interject yourself into conversations with your customers where they are, the platforms where they're talking, and you can solve customer problems, and you can provide good service, and you can make customers happy, there is an ROI to that. You can evaluate that over the long haul and say, we retained customers, we gained customers, et cetera, and there's math to be had. But the value really in that specific activity is not measured in dollars. It's measured in issues resolved. It's measured in you can equate it to dollars by saying, hey, we routed issues to Twitter rather than call center, so we saved call center costs. So you can do some math and put some dollars on it, but there's so much more there about your brand value, your brand reputation, the feeling that your customers have when they deal with you. There's so much more there than ROI. So I like to say, instead of asking the question, what is the ROI of social media, pull back a little further and say, what do I get in return? Because that's the same question in general. It's just bigger than money, right? Money's a big part of it. We owe it to our shareholders, our executives, et cetera, to look at the bottom line. We have to do that from a business perspective, but there's so much more to it than that. And if we think only in terms of money, we're putting blinders on and missing the great value that comes with it.
It's such a good point. There's this notion that as marketers, we're just only the touchy-feelies. We do the arts and crafts, and we never think about the math and the value and all of those kinds of things. And what I hear is you not saying that no, that doesn't matter, that's not important. But what I do hear you giving a little bit of permission for is this idea of creative math, and that we need to be more creative in the where you can put a dollar and cent to it, do it. Absolutely. Value is a number. That is true. That's fact. But value is more than a number, and creativity. And there's a way for us creatives to still get in the math game and do some creative math. I love that. I know that you are the author of 2 books. Those are no easy feats. That is a complicated thing to do. And, lots of congratulations towards you on those. And I know that those have obviously helped you as you've moved forward in your career. You're not in the midst of writing a book right now, but the While You Were Working brand and the While You Were Working show is all put around this idea that we get so busy just doing our day jobs and doing the day-to-day things that we forget to look up and say, what is going on around us and what should we be, taking notice of? What are we missing? What did we miss while we were working? And as an author, I thought it would be an interesting question to just kind of see, you're not writing one right now, but if you were writing a book, or if you were looking for a book that you thought, there couldn't be a more more perfect book for our environment right now in 2018, getting ready to go to 2019, what would that book be about? And what would that book be about?
You asked me that, in the prep for this, and I didn't have an answer then, and I'm not sure my answer is going to be much better now. I think if I could dream up the ideal book to read right now for anybody, I really think for me and for those of us who are practitioners in the field, it would probably be different than that for those who are trying to really learn the field. But for those who are practitioners in the field, I think mine would be, how the book would be about why and how do we communicate better how simple this can really be. Because every time I talk to people about things like social media marketing or search engine optimization, these concepts, the practice of them can be complex, especially if you have complex businesses, complex websites, lots of different product sets, etc. Search engine optimization can be a world of complexity. But the simple principles that help people understand how it works are simple. SEO is simple. All Google has ever tried to do is say, what we want to do is present a searcher with the most relevant results for that keyword for that searcher. And that is the most relevant results as to timeliness, location, content that's related to what they're typing in. And so how does that translate? So if you know anything about SEO, you know that the best results are usually the ones that have the most votes from other websites, inbound links that say this piece of content's better than everything else, right? So and there are people out there in the SEO world and marketers like us. Our job is to try and take our clients' websites and game the system to make it seem like they deserve to rank higher than their competition when maybe they don't deserve to rank higher than their competition. But ultimately, what Google is asking for is the number one result for each search is going to vary by person, location, etc. But it should be the number one website that deserves to rank number one for that particular person's query. And so I don't find that to be a complex concept at all. And yet when you sit down and try to talk a client or a coworker who doesn't necessarily focus on SEO but needs to understand it for a project, sometimes it's like you're talking to a deer in headlights. Now, I am a dumb guy from Eastern Kentucky. I grew up where the Hatfields and McCoys are from, and I am the first person to stand up and say that people from Eastern Kentucky are not stupid. We're not rednecks. We're not hillbillies in the ignorance sense of that stereotype, that we are very smart and well-educated and so on and so forth. In fact, Matt Cutts, the guy who was the face and the guardian of the Google search algorithm for years, is from Rowan County, Kentucky. In the SEO world, there you are. I don't consider myself to be infinitely smarter than any other person walking down the street. So I find it very difficult to understand why it's difficult to explain some of these concepts, because I don't find them very hard. And so I think that's the book that I would love to see now for practitioners. If I were a small business owner trying to figure out the world of digital marketing, it might be similar, but it wouldn't be the same.
Well, we have a saying here at Rogue. We talk about how simple is actually hard, and getting things down to being simple is super hard. And I could see how that could warrant itself an entire book. So, that's great. So Rogue Nation, I think even if we don't have the book yet, I think Jason brings up a really good point in that sometimes we just make it too complex. And I've learned that we sometimes show a lot more than what people are asking for. We may need it all. We may need to understand it all, but we don't necessarily need to show it all. And so I think there's a little bit of that is probably what you're talking about. But there's a lot of craft and a lot of design in making something simple. And I could see how that could warrant itself a book. Jason, it's amazing how fast time flies. It's already, we are already here at the end of the show and had a couple of the questions for you. But I think that this was super helpful for those that have tuned in and those that will tune in. We also know how this medium works. A lot of people didn't necessarily stop everything they were doing right this second to watch us, but we know that they will. And so, Jason, I thank you for taking your time and sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. We certainly appreciate it. And Rogue Nation, as you know, in just a little while, we'll have a link to this live up on gorogue.net under the Rogue Think section. We'll have some links to articles that Jason has written, all the digits on how to get with him at Jason Falls is the best way to get him on all his channels. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next While You Were Working. Thanks for joining us.